Everybody gets it wrong about Voyager all the time, and I'm going to explain why. Now, lately, a lot of people on YouTube have been trying to explain just what Voyager is and where it fits in within Starfleet, what its mission is. And they're all wrong. So I've been watching Star Trek for well over 30 years at this point, and I always enjoyed the naval fiction element of Star Trek. That's why I've done 2 videos previously explaining away 2 separate starship classes. I've done one on the Bird of Prey and I've done one on the Oberth class. And really, when you look at spaceships in the Star Trek universe, you can really draw parallels from Earth's maritime history. For instance, I argued that the Bird of Prey was like a Chinese junk type vessel, and I described the Oberth class as meant to be like a sloop of war, the kind of starship that you get command of or you're trained on before you get given the opportunity to serve on one of the bigger ships, like a ship of the line or a frigate. Now, I could argue that the Intrepid class, and I'll say Voyager from now on because it's easier. We all recognise Voyager. It's the hero ship of the Voyager series. So I could argue that Voyager is meant to sort of represent an old school like naval frigate from the Napoleonic era, a light frigate at that, and its mission sort of would fit that. But it's not a good fit, that argument. It's a bit more complicated than that. I don't think that Voyager is meant to be a frigate. I think what the Intrepid class, what the Voyager is within Starfleet, what its role is, what its job function is in Starfleet, is a lot more fun than that, and it's a lot more recent than that as well. So let's look at Voyager and the Intrepid class in general, and let's gaze on it with our more cynical kind of eye. So what do we know about the Intrepid class? Where does it fall? What era is it in? Well, we can see from its design that it was a brand new class of starship that entered service in the late TNG era, early Deep Space Nine era. And what was happening with the Federation at the time? What was the geopolitical situation, for want of a better way of putting it, for the Federation at the time? Well, so I actually covered that in another video. I've done a video about the why of Deep Space Nine, about just what Starfleet was doing in that sector at that particular time and why they decided that they needed to be at Bajor before they discovered a wormhole there. I mean, that changed everything. But what was happening? What was going on in history of Star Trek at the time? Well, we can see from the first episode of Deep Space Nine that it happens after the events of Wolf 359. Now, in Star Trek terms and the in-universe, Wolf 359 changed everything for Starfleet. And by that I mean Starfleet overnight had a rude awakening, and it went from being a largely sedentary kind of peacekeeping exploration force, and it had to go back onto a war footing. Subsequent Starfleet designs that came after Wolf 359 are just wildly different to pre-Wolf 359 designs. You can see that reflected in the designs as well. You see, if you look at Voyager and just look at the average corridor on Voyager, and you compare that to a corridor on the Enterprise D, for instance, it's far darker, far more militaristic, and that is a reflection of the era of when the Intrepid class was designed. Yes, it's designed as an explorer, as part of its mission, but the military application of this ship is a lot more highlighted than the civilian aspect of it. It wasn't just the Borg what Starfleet saw as a threat at the time. the Dominion wasn't a threat. The Dominion didn't exist in their eyes at the time. They had no clue that the Dominion was even out there. But what they did know was out there was a resurgent Romulan Star Empire. And I mean, they didn't have anything on them. They had no clue about them. The Romulans had been gone for like 70 odd years or something at that point, and they didn't know what the Romulans' intentions were. So they needed some classes of starship which could fight the Romulans. There was also the incident as well, like with yesterday's Enterprise. I mean, I know that happens in an alternate timeline and everything, but reports of that must have got back to Starfleet Command via Captain Picard, some intelligence reports or something like that, and it demonstrated that the Klingons were no slouch. They were still a force to be reckoned with, and if they ever went sour, they could prove to be a big problem. So you need some beefier, more militaristic type starships, as well as starships that are capable of fighting off the Borg. And as we see in Voyager, the Intrepid class is eminently capable against the Borg. So it's in this atmosphere that the Intrepid class was designed. I mean, it may have started out in its earliest incarnations as a purely scientific type vessel, but later on those designs changed through necessity, and any research facilities and exploration facilities that would be left on it after the redesign would be there purely as a hangover from that, and because Starfleet still at its core is a force for good and it is a force for peaceful exploration. But for me, the emphasis of the design of the Intrepid class is far more militaristic than it is science, and you can see this in Voyager. Voyager spends more time fighting than it does exploring. So what do we know about the Intrepid class? We know a lot about it because of Voyager. We know that it's 344 metres long and it's really fast. As far as Starfleet vessels go, it's faster than the Galaxy class, that's really doing something. Galaxy classes are really fast. In fact, the only other starship that I know of that can do a faster top speed than Voyager of that era is the Sovereign class, the Enterprise E. What else do we know? We know it's got a maximum crew of 200 on it, which is small, it's tiny for a starship. I mean, even a ship of comparable size, although they're older, the Excelsior classes are about the same size, but they've got crews of 400 odd people. And yeah, you can put that down to the age gap between them. I mean, Voyager is far more automated than an Excelsior class, but crew size can tell you a lot about a ship's mission type. And it's often said online as well with Voyager, you can see what its weapons loadout is. Now, it's got lots of phaser arrays, it's bristling with them, every arc of fire is covered. It's got 4 torpedo launchers as well, and importantly as well for the argument I'm going to make, it's got, for its size and power output from its warp core, it's got a really strong shield grid. Its shields are comparable to a Galaxy class's shields, but that comes at a cost. Its phaser power is lower, and this is important for the argument I'm about to make. So the next question is, and it may sound silly talking about Star Trek, starships and all that kind of stuff, but the question is, what is the purpose of a navy? Why do we have national navies on planet Earth? And it links to Star Trek quite well, because quite simply, all Star Trek really is a giant space navy versus other space navies. I mean, people often say that Gene Roddenberry described Star Trek as wagon train to the stars, but in actual fact Star Trek was more like Hornblower in space. We have navies on Earth to protect our commerce, to protect our trade. Most of the cargo that gets moved around planet Earth gets moved in shipping containers. A small percentage of it goes by air, and an even smaller percentage goes by road, but the main bulk of carrying capacity for cargo on Earth is in container ships. And the reason we have navies isn't to go and fight and sink other navies really, although that is a big part of their mission. The real mission is to protect those shipping lanes and protect those unarmed cargo ships. But I'm not going to attempt to argue that the Intrepid class is some sort of escort vessel for the Federation's cargo ships. No, that honour goes to the Defiant class chiefly, and maybe some older Miranda classes and things like that might carry out that mission type. No, Voyager is something a lot more fun. Now I've got to be a bit careful here because my last video kind of got a little bit shadow banned because I mentioned something about the runners-up of the Second World War. But the losing side in that conflict had 3 ships that were very peculiar and very specific, and they came out of some very specific political and design necessity kind of type reasons. I'm talking about, of course, the Deutschland class. These were, in Britain we call these pocket battleships, because they was the strangest type cruisers that had sort of hit the water. They was ingenious in their design. They were cruisers of a type, but where a cruiser normally would sacrifice armour for heavier weapons, they reversed that principle. They had thicker armour and smaller caliber weapons on them. They had 11-inch guns on them and thick battleship level kind of armour, but still managed to retain that high top speed of a cruiser. And importantly for my argument, they had just tremendous range as well. They had like a 20,000 mile cruise capability about them. So rather than being an exploration cruiser or a tactical science vessel or something like that, which a lot of people like the idea of, I'm going to argue that no, the Intrepid class wasn't that. The Intrepid class's mission was of a commerce raider. Bear with, because I'm not going to drop that on you and not explain my logic, but I have a very peculiar brand of logic and I am exposing you all to it here. So remember what I said. The Intrepid classes were fast, so was the Deutschland class. The Intrepid classes had very strong shields. The Deutschlander class had really thick armour, but it traded that off for smaller caliber weapons. It had 11-inch guns on it. Voyager had lower capacity phasers. So the design philosophy for the Intrepid class, I'm arguing that what it can't outrun, it can outfight, and what it can't outfight, it can outrun. Think about it. If it all kicked off with the Romulans and you sent your 7 or so Intrepid classes into the Romulan Empire deep behind enemy lines, the Romulans are going to spend literally millions of hours, tens of thousands of troops, hundreds of ships hunting down these 7 ships, and in all that time what are they doing? They're raiding colonies, they're blowing up cargo ships, they're causing a complete menace, they're shutting down all lines of communication and supply throughout the Romulan Empire, or whomever you are fighting at the time. But a ship of this type would obviously need to be able to service itself and maintain itself and operate far away from any Federation starbase. Well, we see this in Voyager. Voyager spent 7 years in the Delta Quadrant, and when it returned it only came back stronger. I actually think that's part of the reason as well that we see when you look at the designs for the Intrepid class, in particular Voyager. If you look at those exploded diagrams, you can make out that it's actually carrying a spare warp engine in it. I mean, that would be just so handy in a war fighting scenario and you're behind the lines in the Klingon Empire, or you're behind the lines in the Cardassian Union or something like that. You've got damage to your warp core and you can hide yourself in some sort of nebula or behind a planet or something somewhere, and you can swap out your warp core for a fresh one. Then all of a sudden that damage isn't a mission kill, is it? It's literally, you can just carry on. I also think it goes a long way to explaining just why Janeway was selected for command of Voyager. Now this one's a bit of a leap of logic, but bear with, right? So when you think about it, and when you think about how the bureaucracy of Starfleet would work, you know, nowadays, like when they select commanders for aircraft carriers or destroyers or whatever, they go through their records with a fine-tooth comb and they look at their personalities and they see if they're the right fit for the job. That would be like a millionfold in the Federation. You'd have teams of counsellors and psychologists looking at things, and you'd have computers running algorithms to choose the right captains out and everything. And that is how command would be given. And when you look at Janeway's character throughout the run of Voyager, now she gets a lot of stick as a captain because she makes bad decisions at times, and I disagree with that. I think she makes the best decisions at times, but one of the defining characteristics of Janeway that sets her apart from all of the other captains in Star Trek is her recklessness at times, is her reckless bravery. She is almost suicidal at times in her bravery. We see that in Year of Hell for starters, but she's the perfect captain for that kind of mission type. Voyager literally spent 7 years behind enemy lines without let up almost. Every week they encountered some sort of hostile alien that they had to get round, and it was Janeway's leadership style that got them through that. Now don't get me wrong, if it had been the Enterprise that was stranded in the Delta Quadrant, things would have worked out a little bit differently, but Picard would have got them home. I had the same faith in Sisko. So we got the right captain and we've got the mission type, and we're starting to sort of see how it would fit that mission type. But I think another dead giveaway is the fact that the Intrepid class can land on planets. The only other starship I know that can do that, although it is non-canon that it can do that, it says it in the technical manuals, is the Defiant class. But apart from scientific reasons, why would you want to land your entire 700,000 ton starship on a planet's surface? Well, I think it links in with what I was saying a moment ago about that secondary warp core they had. If you're deep in Romulan space and you've got a fair amount of battle damage, but there's a planet there that you can go and land on, and for some reason or another, Star Trek style, like the Romulans just either ain't in the area in force, or you know, there's something jamming the sensors or whatever around that planet. If you could land on that planet, it would make repairing your ship a lot easier and a lot more efficient than doing it in orbit somewhere. I think it goes a long way as well to explaining just why the Intrepid class is seemingly the first class of starship to have an EMH on it as standard. Now, necessity is the mother of invention, and if you've got a class of starship which you have got the specific mission type in mind for, then an EMH really makes sense, because again, we spoke a minute ago about a damaged warp core being like mission terminal for it, so you carry a spare. Well, lack of medical staff is also mission terminal as well, so the EMH makes total sense now when you start looking at it in that perspective. I think as well this goes quite far in explaining why Voyager is seemingly capable of adopting any alien tech that it finds useful. For instance, if you're operating deep into enemy space, resupply is going to be an issue for you. So the ability to adopt parts that you've stolen off of other spaceships or that you've managed to take from wreckage somewhere, that's a very handy capability for a starship to have. Voyager in that sense is almost got like an open architecture sort of type of design about it, and in actual fact behind the scenes the idea would be for Voyager, they was planning on it being, when it got back to Earth at the end of season 7, the idea was for it to have completely alien sort of technology throughout it, and for it to look totally different to when it entered the Delta Quadrant, like for instance different warp nacelles on it perhaps, and it's supposed to have like hydroponic gardens along all the corridors and everything like that. And whilst I do like the idea of that, I've got to be honest with you, I think it would be sacrilege to do that. That'd be complete Philistines to do it, because Voyager is hands down one of the most prettiest starships they ever put out there. And it's the type of ship that if you've got in your space, if it's in your territory, it's going to be a real headache for you to hunt it down, because it's faster than most of your ships and it can outgun a lot of your ships, and the ones it can't outgun, those shields on it are so strong it's going to run away from you and get out of there before you can do any real damage. So no, Voyager isn't a science cruiser or a heavy science ship or whatever you want to put it. It's not that. It's a commerce raider, and it's really cool because of it. So if you've made it this far, thanks for watching, I do appreciate it. If you like the video, consider hitting that like button. If you don't, that's also fine. Again, this channel is just a personal view on things. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.